Hi, listeners. Welcome to Sunday School Bonanza, a This Week in Mormons production, bringing you a gospel doctrine rundown of gospel doctrine things. Podcast time. All right, so before we get right to it, this week's guest host along with me hasn't been with us for a while, so we're glad to welcome him back to the studio, Bill Doolittle. Hello.
Thanks for letting me back in, Jeff.
You know, we've missed you, Bill.
As I've missed you.
We haven't seen you since the beginning of the year, I think.
It was what, January?
Life happens. Bill's a lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm lucky when I get to, I was going to say I'm lucky when I get to pin him down, but I didn't want that to be misconstrued.
Yeah, we better just say when you see me.
You know what I'm saying. So, folks, we hope that we're in lesson 28 this week. It's called After the Fire, a Still Small Voice. I think this is a powerful lesson. I'm looking forward to this lesson. We deal primarily with Elijah. I don't think Elijah goes to other lessons or anything. You will find that a lot of these lessons for the remainder of the year oftentimes focus on singular prophets, and sort of you'll have one on Amos, one on like Hosea. There'll be a lot of ones just like that. So we deal a lot with Elijah. Your reading would be 1 Kings chapter 17 through 19. Very straightforward reading, which is good. There's a strong narrative in this lesson, so if you're preparing it as a teacher, it's very easy to get a flow in that sense and go from thing to thing. If you want to be topical, then you can do that too, because there's a lot of good stuff. I believe, first off, that we must call attention to the attention activity, should we not?
I think we should.
So, here's a story by Thomas S. Monson. Basically, he tells the tale of a young missionary who is prepared for a mission call, and all that went well. Now, there appeared in a statement, Brother Garcia will serve at great sacrifice to his family, for he is the means of much of the family support. He has but one possession, a treasured stamp collection, which he is willing to sell if necessary to help finance his mission. So,
that's asking a lot.
Yeah, and so the brethren were aware of this basically, but President Kimball felt inspired and said, have him sell his stamp collection. The sacrifice will bring great blessings. And so that goes down. And then, with a twinkle in his eye and a smile on his face, the loving prophet said, each month at church headquarters, we receive thousands of letters from all parts of the world. See that these stamps are saved and provide them to Jose at the conclusion of his mission. Did I do that justice?
I think that's pretty much the story.
The moral of the story, of course, is that when we put the things of God first in our lives, he rewards us, far greater than what we could have planned when we're willing to sacrifice. So, it's a fine way to illustrate it until you realize that he was selling...
until you realize that he gave up a stamp collection, and we don't know. He might have had like some really nice old stamps, something like, the main thing that your value in stamps is rarity and antiquity, right? Yeah. So then the way that he got... They get the stamp collection back from the church. They're like, hey, just save all these from the mail that we get now.
From all over the world, though.
From all over the world, but only for the last 2 years.
Yes.
So that old Mayan stamp or whatever, like crazy antiquity thing the kid probably had in his stamp collection? Yeah, don't worry about that. We're going to give you one from New Zealand yesterday.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's an exact trade.
Yeah, so if I were you as a teacher, I would try to think of a better one if you know one that actually illustrates an augmentation in blessings as opposed.
Or maybe just focus on all the crazy spiritual blessings the kid
I think
got
that's
from
the main
serving
one.
his
Sometimes
mission,
we
right?
sacrifice temporal things to serve the Lord, and we don't receive a temporal blessing in response.
It's okay if you don't get all your stamps back.
Yeah, that's fine. But anyway, so Kings, I believe, Bill, you're starting us off there, right? You're batting lead off today.
All right, so we've got the same battle that they've been fighting in Israel basically since they came out of Egypt and arrived in the Promised Land, which is the same battle that the U.S. fought in our own Civil War, which is whether to have centralized or decentralized leadership, right?
In a way. And we've seen the split basically between... Yeah.
So the centralized folks under Solomon, tried to, and then Rehoboam says, we're going to keep this program up, and half the people say, no, forget it, our tribes are out. So now we arrive at the spiritual consequences of that fight, which is half the kingdom wants to centralize religious worship in one place and be true to their God, and that's Elijah's on that team. He wants to keep the faith pure, right? And on the other side, you've got King Ahab and his wife Jezebel, who are saying, well, it's okay. We want to mingle in with the locals. We want to adopt worship of Baal. We want to make that part of our program.
And Jezebel's not even an Israelite, right? Isn't she from Tyre?
That's right.
Yeah,
she was a wedding into a neighboring people to preserve peace, right?
One of those sorts of things, yeah.
So Anyway, so Ahab and she are not trying to remain true to the gospel, to God.
No, they don't care at all.
And they're trying to mingle it, and just for, sort of geopolitical convenience. So Elijah finds himself at odds with them and is constantly fighting them. So Elijah says, all right, you know what? I've got the sealing power, and I need to... He's kind of losing. Ahab and that side of things are more popular among Israel, and so he says, all right, we need to perform some miracles and stick close to God. So the first thing he does, because he has the sealing power, he seals up the heavens so that it won't rain. And you might remember that Nephi, son of Helaman, does the same thing in the Book of Mormon, right? So he does that for like 2 years. There's just no rain. And I don't know. I mean, this seems like it's always a good way to focus everyone's attention on spiritual matters. Like up until then, if things are going well and there's really, they're mingling with the other peoples, there aren't as many battles, then people are maybe not going to think too hard about whether or not obeying God is the right thing. So you have to get everyone's attention and remind them of the power of God.
And I think it's remarkable, too, because we think of the sealing power, of course, involving families and genealogy and this and that, but you really see the power in that. That as Elijah said, as the Lord God of Israel liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, but according to my word. Yeah. Now, that's a strong reminder of the sealing power that Elijah held. To physically be able to say, I hold the power to seal the heavens. The Lord can direct me, and I alone can actually reopen the heavens for rain to stop the famine, which is it's hardcore.
And it's also, it's just really evidence that at this time, God felt, Jehovah felt that it was the right thing to do to just give abundant evidence that Elijah was his guy, right? That he's backing one side of this fight. And we're going to see that throughout the lesson for today that, there are just so many instances in which a miracle occurs. Like so he runs off and hides, right? Yeah. Elijah runs and hides because Ahab and Jezebel are trying to get him killed. So he runs and hides by this brook, and he's miraculously fed by these ravens. And then, afterwards, he goes to be fed by this widow and her son, and he performs 2 big miracles there.
Huge miracles, those two.
Their cruise doesn't
think
run
about
out.
that. Yeah, because they're well into the famine by this point.
Right.
And so this woman basically has, I believe, just some flour, some oil.
That's pretty much it.
That's basically it.
She can make one cake, and then she's going to lie down and die.
And it's interesting because it's not Elijah being, greedy in any sense. It wasn't a selfish request, but he was very clearly, as a prophet, testing her faith. Yeah. And that's all it was. Because imagine how would you feel if you have 2 pennies to rub together, and a prophet shows up and says, okay, you have nothing. Mm-hmm. I want you to make me some food. Yeah. I'm not even worrying about you and your kid. And to have the faith to say, well, you know what? You're a representative of the Lord. I'm going to do what is needed here. And the blessings, of course, were immense.
Huge.
After that.
I mean,
the basket was never empty, basically. After that.
Yeah, you make a really good point. I sort of felt awkward at times on my mission where I was serving in a part of the world that didn't have as many material resources as places where I come from. And yet I'd go into people's homes and they're offering me so much, and I'm like, oh man, is this okay? Like, I feel bad about the fact that they're giving me out of their poverty, right? Like the widow's mite. And imagine now Elijah's doing the same thing on an even much more dramatic scale. So, but the miracle comes to pass, and the woman is basically she and her son are given an exemption from the famine for the rest of it. She never runs out of food, and the son is brought back to life. There's all these miracles showing that Elijah, and maybe a lot of that we get the benefit of it because it's written down. But at that time, the people seeing it are just kind of Elijah and the people that served with him. Yeah. So now Elijah knows by miracle after miracle he's God's guy. Definitely. And he's got to now go represent. So that's kind of the next phase. And
it is. And I just love that the faith that he demonstrates. And it's a great lesson to me to remember as we put the Lord first in all the things that we do. That's when we're blessed. And I see a lot of parallels to the latter days. It's very easy for people to say, what if I'm starving? You expect me to pay tithing even when I can't pay my rent and this and that? And those are questions of faith for people. And unfortunately, I see many people who say, no. Because I also believe God is pragmatic, but I also believe he gives us commandments for a reason. So it's not that you just say, I'm not going to pay my tithing so I can take care of these other things. I've found in my life, not to stick on tithing, but when I've sacrificed and paid my tithing and done what I've covenanted to do, that ways have always materialized. I've been fine. The Lord blesses us a lot. So moving on, I love this whole section right here. And in the lesson, it's short. So if you're teaching this, maybe check out the Institute manual, which I think gives some more detail on this. I think this is a good episode.
It's awesome.
And it's unfortunate that the lesson feels that it's enough to just kind of mention that, okay, Elijah challenges the priests of Baal, and then he opens the heavens for rain. So what happens is we're in the third year of the famine, and the Lord commanded Elijah to go to Ahab, and that he'd send rain upon the earth. But, of course, Ahab also blamed Elijah for the famine. So that's, of course, what's
appropriately.
Yeah, of course. But as Elijah had requested, Ahab gathered all of Israel and what are described as 850 false priests at Mount Carmel. Now, Mount Carmel today is in about northwestern Israel, reasonably close to the Mediterranean. It's probably about 2,000 feet tall or something like that. There's even an Elijah, I believe Bill went there. There's an Elijah statue on it today because of what happened there. But one of these lines that I love is at Mount Carmel. There's a line that says, "How long halt ye between two opinions?" This is what Elijah basically says to the Israelites who are present. So what does that mean, Bill?
It means they're sort of hung up between, real orthodoxy like he's offering them and this sort of diluted polytheism of just worshiping anybody who happens to be around.
Yeah. I mean, a literal translate, it really translates actually to "How long hop ye upon two bows?" So picture, if you will, like a bird just kind of indecisively bouncing back and forth on a tree. That's right. And that's really where Israel's at this point. They've got what Ahab and what Jezebel are preaching, and they've got what Elijah is preaching, and they're super non-committal at this point, despite what they're being shown.
I mean, even Ahab, if you go into the chapter in 18, even Ahab's chief advisor, this is Ahab who really doesn't like the extremely orthodox people. His chief advisor is a guy named Obadiah, and Obadiah saved a lot of prophets from Ahab earlier before we get to this story. So he's an orthodox guy. So even Ahab's administration has people of both opinions in it, right?
Right. Yeah. And so I love the challenge itself, and I want to make sure I do this justice, but my understanding of this wonderful challenge is that basically Elijah challenges the people to have fire and make sure I'm not missing anything here, Bill, but to have fire on their altars, and because the people who worship Baal is a sun god. So, of course, Elijah's saying, you're not going to have any problem with this. He's the sun god. Fire's everywhere for you guys. Fire ubiquity. That's what you've established here with your faith.
It's a gigantic nuclear furnace. Surely it can light up a couple of animal sacrifices.
And so I love that that's what he challenges them with. And of course, you've got all the different priests there. You've also got female counterparts. You've got Ashtoreth, Venus, the Jezebel worship, which is the female counterpart to Baal. All these people. Now, the priests of Baal call upon their god for a very long time. He mentions it all morning long, nothing but futility. And it gets to the point where Elijah actually mocks them, which is funny because I'm sorry, I don't picture, President Monson standing in front of some people today and just being like, ha ha, ha ha. Keep trying, boys.
We don't get to do that anymore.
We don't get to do that anymore. But I love that it says, even after that, Elijah antagonizes them relentlessly that they can't get it done. It says from morning even until noon.
Yeah.
And then from, well into the day, this keeps going on. And I believe even, didn't they also have like a kind of a pyre of sorts underneath their altars to sort of cheat in a way?
Yep.
And so Elijah, even with that, doused out everything so that there could be no contest about who has the power of God. Yeah. Because they're sitting there cheating, basically trying to get it done.
Yeah, they set up the pyre and they can't get it. And so Elijah's like, I'm going to dump water all over this and do it.
Yeah. So the great thing that happens here is that naturally Elijah is, I believe, actually able to demonstrate fire. But it's interesting. It says right here in one of the manuals explaining what this fire of the Lord was. It says, quote, "The fire proceeding from Jehovah was not a natural flash of lightning, which could not produce any such effect, but miraculous fire falling from heaven." So they describe it like as a supernatural origin, which I think is awesome. So this wasn't like a bolt of lightning that started a fire. This was an actual flame that came down, which I see many parallels, of course, to the flame that guarded the Israelites as they escaped from Egypt. I see plenty of parallels with that. And so there you go. So he challenges the priests of Baal. He basically wins the day.
Or so we think.
Or so we think. One thing as a side note that I'm grateful to see is that Elijah, despite all of this, and his life was in danger, and yet he's able to very, very dramatically, with almost braggadocio, go up on this and prove them wrong. And you could see in other scriptural circumstances them saying, well, guess what? Now we're going to kill you for this.
Because Ahab had been searching for him to kill him for years.
Definitely.
And that's why Obadiah didn't want to talk to Ahab about it. He's like, Elijah tells Obadiah to tell Ahab, hey, I'm here, I want to talk to him. And Obadiah's like, he's going to try to kill you, and he's probably going to kill me too.
It's kind of like David and Saul's son. Was that
Jonathan?
Jonathan, yeah. Jonathan's the same way, just like, I don't know where he is, Dad.
Yeah, he's around. He's somewhere. Yeah. He'd like to talk to you. Anyway, so he thinks he wins, right? He does this great thing, but as you just suggested, right? They don't buy it, and Jezebel can't stand this, right? Because he's just defeated her prophets, her priests of Baal. So he flees again, so that he goes back to where, goes back out into the wilderness, and he feels so frustrated because he has just demonstrated, not only through all the miracles that he saw, but through this all day long, my God is better than your God,
basically,
demonstration. Like, I will just, like, I actually
he
have
has objectively
supernatural power.
Proven it. Yeah,
I won, and I'm still being rejected by the leadership of the people, including Queen Jezebel, who obviously isn't Israelite, but is in a position of authority. And so he says, "Look, this is it. I have tried, and I'm now out." He goes out in the wilderness and he says, "Lord, just take away my life. I don't want this anymore." And so the Lord won't let him do it, and sends him food and water and brings him comfort. So, I mean, Elijah is right to be discouraged, right? This is the same kind of wickedness that, we're in the 9th century BC here. So within a couple of hundred years, about 3, this is going to come back to end, or about 200 years, this is going to end the northern kingdom. Yeah. This is going to be the reason it falls apart. Is this kind of behavior. So he's rightfully discouraged, but then God comes and reminds him in this powerful way that we've heard this story, but it's I certainly had forgotten that this appearance of God happens in the context of comforting Elijah, and it's the still small voice, right? It's Elijah is hiding in a cave, and he's discouraged because he thinks he's the only Jew that really worships God, the only Israelite, and they bring him out. God says, "Go stand outside the cave." And so he goes and stands outside the cave, great. And there's the storm and the earthquake, and in none of those things was the voice of God. But then afterwards comes this still small voice, and it seems like it's a common theme in the Old Testament that when His servants are discouraged, one of the things that God does is to remind them of His power and that He is in charge. We see that in the book of Job. We see it in even just the miracles from the Exodus. And that's, I think, an important reminder for us is whenever we're discouraged, it's important to remember the power of God and yet the intimacy with which He speaks to us. And that's, I think, one of the big lessons you can take away from Elijah. That's one of the big ones.
And that's a great note to go off on, I think, actually. Yeah. So this is a strong lesson. Make sure to read it. Read those scriptures. They're great passages. They read nicely. I mean, there's good stuff to read in 17 through 19 of 1 Kings. So, Bill, thank you for your thoughts.
Jeff, thanks for having me.
Much appreciated. Folks, we hope you will go and join us at thisweekinmormons.com. Leave us a comment. Shoot us an email at contact@thisweekinmormons.com. Join us on Facebook and Twitter. And if you've never written a review on iTunes or Stitcher, I sincerely ask you to do so because it helps immensely with the rankings of this show. And so if you enjoy Sunday School Bonanza, it's a great way to help more people discover it. Other than that, folks, we hope you have a great Sabbath and that the Spirit be with you. This is Sunday School Bonanza.